Hello and welcome to Wes's RP Corner. Today I'm going to be talking about Book of the Dead, which is a supplement for the New World Darkness line. It is also a supplement for Geist the Sin Eater. Now, I do not have the physical copy of this book. I just bought the PDF. For those of you who like the cover, I really do. Here it is. Pretty. Alright, so what is Book of the Dead? It is not a book for mummifying. It's not instructions on how to mummify people. That's a whole different game. Now, Book of the Dead is a book detailing the underworld. And this is the place where people go where they die. It's not heaven. Certainly not heaven. It is not really hell either, even though it can be hostile and a dangerous place. But it is not a place necessarily of suffering. It's kind of like purgatory because there is some sort of great beyond that they allude to. No one really knows where that is, what that is, or if it even really exists. So far as we know, this is where you go when you die. However, the living can find ways to get in there also. And now there's a lot of beneficial things that the living can get from a place like this. However, there are also a ton of risks that could give you fates worse than death. And that's what fascinates me about this book, is the possibilities for what you can find down there and what you can get out of it and what you're willing to lose in order to get those things. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not a big fan of Geist the Sin Eater. Out of all the New World of Darkness lines, it is not one that jumps out to me and says, play me. Not to say it's a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. And I think you can do interesting things with it. But I don't necessarily think it's something I want to jump into with both feet because it sounds exciting to play. I don't know. If it was more ghost-oriented instead of being a half-person, half-ghost, half-spirit thing, I would probably be more interested. Something more like Wraith. However, this is more directed towards, these weird half-human, half-ghost things. The closest analogy I can make for that is Danny Phantom from Nickelodeon. And something about that just doesn't click with me. Not to say I don't like Danny Phantom, and that's probably a bad analogy for what a Sin Eater really is. But I don't know. That being said, I like that this book gives you options for what to do if you are not a Sin Eater. Ways to get in if you're not a Sin Eater, and what you can possibly do. Because I really like the idea of mortals or other supernaturals who aren't very well versed in the dead going down here for something and finding out that there's more than they bargained for. Instead of these, oh yes, I'm a Sin Eater, I go down to the underworld every other day for tea with my favorite ghost. No. Not that it doesn't really imply that it's like that, but I feel like if anyone's gonna know about the underworld and how to navigate it, it's them. I prefer I have no idea what I'm doing, but I have to go down there for X. That resonates more with me than, oh, it's just part of my job. I digress. So, I'm going to go over the fiddly bits of this book, because there are a few. And then you and I are going to take a tour into the underworld, where we will explore some of what is down there. If you want the full exploration, I'd say go buy the book, because it's awesome. But I digress. So, the fiddly bits. The book starts with a chapter detailing kind of various myths from different time periods about the dead or going into the underworld. Think Orpheus going down to save Persephone? I'm not big on Greek mythology. I think that's the names. Or was Persephone the wife of Hades? I don't know. I should have done more research. Anyway, myths and legends kind of like that, about people going down to the underworld or things like that. There's some good fiction in here, and then it could be fiction, it could not be, I don't know. And they give you little story hooks that you can throw in there based off of these things. Now, I will preface that with this. Some of them are almost illegible. At least for me. I have a hard time with different fonts sometimes, especially if it's all old and scripty. And there's a lot of that in the early ones of in this chapter. And I skipped a lot of them because of that, because it was hard to read. So if you have that problem, you might have a little trouble with this section too. I know I did. After that, it goes into what you can do if you are not a Sin Eater and you want to go into the underworld. What kind of effects? For example, what is a vampire going to do for a long trip in the underworld if there is no blood? And indeed, there is no blood except for a river of blood, but finding that is difficult. So, what do you do if there's no blood? Well, there's some interesting options in here. For example, vampires, if they spend enough time down there, can adapt and kind of suck the essential life force out from ghosts. Kind of like what the Kuei Jin do in Kindred of the East a little bit. And if you do that for too long, you can get stuck by only doing it. And that is a cool possibility for a vampire that has to go into the underworld because of X. And they also have stuff for Werewolf, Mage, Promethean, goes down the list. Changeling too. And Hunter. And of course, Geist, but we already know what they do. If you read the Geist book. And then it goes into a section of fiddly things for Geists. There are, I think, 2 new keys, a bunch of new rituals, and a bunch of new merits that kind of have to do with the underworld and underworld exploration. And there's some even for mortal characters, which, again, clicks with me more. Like a one for a mortal character where you have a knack for opening these gates into the underworld. You know instinctively what to do, or you have a really easy time doing it. And I think that's just awesome. Especially if you don't really give an explanation as to why. So, those are the fiddly bits. And then it goes into what you're liable to find down there. Now, how do we get to the underworld? There's 2 ways. 2 main ways. There's a couple other ways too, but 2 main ones. There's these Avernian gates. Avernian. I don't know how you pronounce most of the things in this book, so I'm going to butcher them, and you can laugh at me. And the way you get through these is you make some sort of... It wants something. It could be something as simple as a rose from a funeral that's been splintered with a few drops of your blood. Put down the gate. You're free to go down there. It could be as potentially hazardous as taking a recently dead body and pressing the hand against the door. So that could be a problem and create a lot of awkward situations depending on your morality. Are you willing to kill another man in order to get into the underworld for X? I don't know. Are you? That's, again, one of the cool things this book kind of asks, at least in my perspective. And then there are ways you can get in. If you have like a deep love, like Orpheus did, you can get in through that. There's also graveyards. There is a gate in every graveyard, and it's a little more random. It can randomly suck you in to the underworld in a random place and strand you there if you're not careful. I like those too, because it's kind of cool, because, you know, I've explored a few graveyards in my time, and there's always that little slight possibility, you know, behind the right stone is the portal to the underworld, kind of cool stuff like that. So, once you're in the underworld, it's the upper part, which is called the Autochthonos Depths. I think that's how you pronounce it. And this is the kind of the main opening area of the underworld. It is cramped, it is dark, it is like a giant underground network of tunnels and caves with ghosts in it and other things that go bump in the night that are hard to explain, like these spirits called psychopomps. And no one really knows what they do, but people think they ferry the dead from one realm of the dead to the other and kind of move them along. And there are a lot of weird things down there. Particularly of note are the tableaux. The tableau, or I don't really know how you pronounce it because I'm not French, nor have I taken French, and it looks like a French word. Regardless, these are things like Atlas rolling the stone up the hill and the stone falling down and him having to do it forever. Those are things like that. They're usually supposed to teach some kind of moral lesson. They're not punishments per se, because in this level there really are no strict punishments and there are no strict laws. So, and there are rules for trying to get through these. But in order to help people to stop these tableaus, you have to join in order to even communicate with them effectively. Now that brings up an interesting point about the underworld, which is that if you give in to your vices while you're down there, it is harder for you to leave. Which could be interesting if you stumble across one of these tableaus, which is like this mechanical endless orgy. It was really kind of weird. And in order to get people to snap out of it, you have to join in. If your vice is lust, well, sorry to say, sir, but you are shit out of luck. Now, the way you get deeper into the underworld, there's two ways. One is there are rivers in the underworld, and they take you deeper. And these rivers are made of different things like gold or blood or pus. And you can actually drink from these rivers, and they have various effects for good or ill. And the way you travel down these rivers is you can't go willy-nilly, or else you're either going to be tossed against rocks or something. They're the ferrymen, and they will take you down the river for a price. And for some reason, which I'm not totally sure why, they only do it for those who are touched by the dead. So unless you have a sin eater with you, you can't really use the ferrymen. And then they also need a price beyond that. But if you are not one of those, there are also these gates. Series of gates that lead you deeper and deeper. And the only way past the gate is you have to sacrifice part of your body. For example, an arm, a leg, your head, although most people don't do the head. And it is replaced with a spectral one, and you can get yours back if you go out back that gate. If you don't go back out that gate and go to the surface, you lose that limb for good. And it's gone. That can be tricky, especially if people misuse these gates, and there are examples of that in the book. And these lead you deeper. Now, what do you find the deeper and deeper you go? There are these realms of the dead, these dead domains, and they are ruled over these creatures called the Kerberoi. They're not really ghosts, they're kind of more like spirits, but they are these people who rule these various dead realms. And all these dead realms have specific rules for each realm, and if you break those rules, the Kerberoi is going to deal with you, usually harshly. You can become a slave in some. You can be sent to this realm, which is a prison. There is a lot of different ways that if you mess up, they can really mess you up. And there is no cause for ignorance of these laws because they are posted everywhere. Now, these range from clever to kind of boring, in my opinion. I won't mention them all because it is really a lot of fun to go through them. This is a big part of the book, by the way. This is probably 80 pages out of 200 pages. This is the bulk of the book, is these realms. And, for example, the first one you find is this kind of wild western town, like a frontier town. There's a bazaar where you can buy stuff, and it's kind of ruled by these sin eaters, and one is turning into something, and there's this guy, and there's these weird coyotes. Did not appeal to me. It's probably my least favorite, if not down there. Then there's one where these two Kerberoi are fighting for territory in this endless war. And if you go to their realm, you have to pick a side and join this war. If you don't, they will mess you up. And is this endless war against dead people? Dead people fighting other dead people, using weapons from other places. That's pretty awesome. There's this forge where items can be made, but from people's souls. There's this place of gluttony where there's this food that's made of like psychic ectoplasmic essence, and you could have as much sex or food as you want, but if you mess up one of the rules, you are a slave for a certain amount of time and you have to help serve others. It's an interesting concept. There's this one which I find incredibly frustrating. It's like this pilgrimage you can go on, and this one guy will bring like one soul back to life if you go on his merry quest. which is the most random, frustrating, senseless quest that you can think of. I don't know why you would do this, or what kind of sadistic GM would put their players through it, but the possibility of it being there, and again, that theme I said earlier of what is the price of wanting X, that one's pretty obnoxious. It's fun to read through. I don't think it would be fun to play. I would strangle my storyteller within seconds of figuring out, oh, we're going to see that guy? Hell no. So that's kind of fun. I like it when there are villains or entities in games like this that are you love to hate. The fun, there's this Dream Realm, which is again not one of my favorites. It's kind of weird. One of my favorites though is the last one, and the deeper you go down, the weirder these get. And there's one that's probably at the very bottom. And it's this sea that the longer you spend in the water, the more of your identity floats away in little bubbles. So, and the more deeper you sink, the more things that are closer to your identity start floating away. If you get to a certain level and you see these, you can pick them up and add them to you. So it's really kind of weird. And I love it though. It's so cool. Because, like I said, it's pretty much that theme in essence. Because you are potentially, to get something, you are willing to lose much of what makes you you. And that is just so sweet. So, do I recommend this book? I recommend this book even if you don't play World of Darkness. If you just want to read something about the underworld, this book is great. It gives you a lot of mechanical fiddly things. It gives you a lot of things to strive for. It gives you even more delicious consequences for getting these things. So, this book drew me in right off the bat. And it kept, like delving into the underworld in our little tour that we took, the more you read, the deeper it wants to drag you in, because it is just so enticing. And even though I'm not a huge fan of Geist, the ideas I got reading through this of exploring the underworld and the cost of doing so, it sparked such a fire in me. It's weird to explain. I've not capitalized on it yet, but I just love this book, and I had to tell you about it. So if you like this discussion, review, explanation thing, I'm not even sure if it counts as a review. I guess a little bit. Like, comment, tell me if you've used this book. I would love to know what you did with it. If you're planning to use this book, I'd love to know that too. So comment below. I like to respond to comments, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Either way, this has been Wes for Wes's RP Corner on WesAndJessGames. And I don't know about you, I got some business in the underworld to go take care of, so I will see you later. Have a wonderful day in the land of the living.